So, Professor, the claim was that this all started due to an Apache helicopter being taken down. I saw your tweet where you said that this wasn't Iran. I saw the tweet from the foreign minister of Iran, Professor Abbas Araghchi, who essentially said this was, we don't know if it was Iran, but it definitely wasn't intentional. I've spoken to a number of experts on my show over the last few days, and unanimously, all of them say, if Iran wanted to hit an Apache helicopter, there would be nobody alive. The fact that there's a claim that both pilots survived, where there isn't even a parachute in the helicopter, this isn't simply possible. But what's your thoughts, if you can elaborate on what actually happened there?
Oh, yes. An Apache helicopter, if it falls from the sky, they'd be dead or badly wounded. So that is a very important point in itself. But the Iranians have always, when they've downed American planes or drones, or when they've struck American targets and bases, they always claim responsibility. When this helicopter went down, the Iranians didn't give out any statement because they had no idea what had happened. I spoke when that tweet that you asked about, or that you spoke about, right before that tweet, I spoke to a relatively senior military officer, and he said, no, it wasn't us. And he asked, just for my sake, asked another officer. He said, no, it was probably some mechanical failure. So, but it doesn't matter. This helicopter was a part of an aggressive force, and it was over the Strait of Hormuz. And the United States is the aggressive party. They've violated the ceasefire many times. They've murdered Iranians. They carried out war against Iran. Who are they to complain about any of Iran's actions? They're in no position to complain. This is a barbaric regime. It's a barbaric political regime. There's nothing about the regime in Washington that I find redeemable. So they will lie again, and they will, just like in Gaza. Remember the first hospital that they struck? Western media immediately went and repeated the lies that these were resistance rockets, like a resistance rocket killed hundreds of people. And then the second hospital, they went in with the lie about tunnels. Then the third, and then they just went and the West knew that after 4 or 5 hospitals, that after destroying 4 or 5 hospitals, they could no longer make up these stories anymore. So they just stopped reporting it. And then the regime went and destroyed all the hospitals in Gaza, one after another. And remember, in one hospital, they went inside and pulled the plugs on the incubators of the babies. Is anyone in the West talking about that? So the Western media is utterly compromised. They will repeat more or less what the regime says. Even those that hate Trump, they will still side with the Israeli regime. They will still side with the empire. So no one should take any of their narrative seriously.
No doubt, completely agree with you there. And you're talking about the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. They initially took credit for it. And then once there was blowback on social media, not by journalists, that's when they start pretending like that there was it was a failed rocket. But even that was exposed as being a lie. Now, Professor, one thing Iran has said is, and I saw like a bit of your interviews today, and you talked about the water plants, and you talked about how it was a humanitarian catastrophe, a human rights violation, breaking international law. But look, we don't believe there's no such, like, to just a little bit to hear your perspective on this. There's no such thing. We know now there's no such thing as humanitarian law. There's no such thing as international law. We saw it in Gaza. We've seen it in South Lebanon. We've seen it in Iran. So why even talk about it? Like, in my view, I want to hear your thoughts on this perspective, that there should be just an equal response. Like, they hit Iran's water plant, you now need to respond and hit back, because these people don't understand anything. There's no such thing as law. We're living in the wild, wild west. And if they're not stopped, they're going to do something a lot worse. What's your thoughts on this?
Just one thing I'd like to add about the Al-Ahli hospital that you pointed out, and that is, it was so ugly that the Western media tried to hide it. And even Western intelligence agencies went and put out statements that we assessed what went on, and it was the Islamic Jihad or Hamas that launched that rocket, a single rocket that would kill hundreds of people. So intelligence agencies lied. The media lied. They conspire together Why? Because when they hit that hospital and hundreds of people were slaughtered, it created moral outrage across the world. And this was early on in the genocide. And the West wanted to allow the Israeli regime to continue with the genocide. That's why they were going on with they were constantly speaking about those fake rape allegations and the fake beheadings of babies and all that, because they wanted to give cover for the genocide. And that hospital attack was destroying their ability to continue to support the Israeli regime. So the Western media began repeating this fake narrative, even though a resistance rocket could never do that sort of damage. It couldn't do 1/20th of that sort of damage, and they knew it. And then that wasn't enough. So Western intelligence agencies, the French intelligence agency, they went and put out statements that, yes, we did our own study and we checked our intelligence, and it was the Palestinians who did it. So whenever you see Western sources insist on something, you can be pretty sure that there's something very wrong. With regards to Iran's response, of course, it's always been the law of the jungle. The dirty war in Syria, the law of the jungle. The destruction of Libya, the law of the jungle. The starvation siege in Cuba that's been going on for years, the law of the jungle. This goes before Netanyahu. Back during the day of Obama, someone who's praised a lot in the West nowadays, he was a person who carried out huge numbers of drone strikes. And according to many experts, 90% of the people killed in those drone strikes were civilians. So it's always been the law of the jungle. The only difference is that Trump is more crude, less sophisticated, less intelligent, and more open, less hypocritical than the likes of Obama or Biden or the Clintons and so on. But we've always been living in the law of the jungle. In 1980, the United States supported Saddam Hussein in invading Iran. The West gave him chemical weapons. The same German regime that we see right now, they were the leading source of Saddam Hussein's chemical weapons. And these Arab regimes in the Persian Gulf gave hundreds of billions of dollars to Saddam. That was the law of the jungle. They protected Saddam because he was their man. In Syria, they would fake chemical weapons attacks in order to sanction Syria. The Caesar Act was based on fake evidence. Why? They just wanted to undermine the regime because it was in the interest of the Israeli regime. In Libya, remember the Viagra claims and the lies that the Western media put out there so that they could justify attacks on Libya and NATO airstrikes. And in those airstrikes, they contaminated the water supplies of Libya with radioactive material. We know they destroyed Libya. So it's always been the law of the jungle. This is not new, but it's becoming more ugly because it seems more ugly because it's out in the open.
No doubt. And in terms of the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital, you're so right. Everyone was on their side in order to spew the propaganda. It was actually us who had to debunk it. I remember taking the audio of a JASM and then an audio of a resistance rocket and then demonstrating that the audio of the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital was indeed a JASM that had actually been used. So totally agree with you on that. Professor, a bit of a tough question now, which is, we've seen the strikes on Iran, and the response of Iran has been over the last few times to hit Kuwait and Bahrain, and this time an extra, which is Jordan. Jordan facilitated the Israeli attacks on Iran a few days ago. But that being said, I am seeing, largely speaking, the bigger Gulf states, the more powerful Gulf states, not being responded to. And is that, again, the right decision? Because I feel like what may be happening is, because Trump's a bully, this is maybe emboldening him to try and attack more so. And for example, yesterday we were tracking the flights, and it does seem like Saudi airspace was used. Obviously, it needs to be verified. But for example, there was quite clearly a Poseidon PA above it. I had a military expert with me, and it said, just before the strikes. Or if there's a Poseidon P-8 just gone off Saudi airspace, there's going to be a strike. And then we saw the second wave of strikes. So what's your thoughts on Iran's response where kind of UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar have not been responded to as much?
Well, Suleiman, one thing that you should keep in mind is that all of these 5 countries, as we speak, are helping the United States. They're allowing the United States to use their territory against Iran. That continues as we speak. So it's not as if anything has been discontinued. Saudi airspace is used, Qatari territory is used, and their airspace, the Emirates, Kuwait, and Bahrain. All of that is true. And Jordan, of course. These are key allies. And the Republic of Azerbaijan also. And sadly, Turkey also, in a different way. They allow NATO and the United States to collect information on behalf of the Israelis and on behalf of the Americans against Iran. They allow that to happen. AWACS jets, the US bases. So all of this is happening. But there are different calculations in Iran. I'm not privy to, obviously, these sort of things, but sometimes they want to send a particular message to a particular country to push it in a different direction. But all of these countries are guilty of crimes against humanity. They thought that the United States would carry out a war against Iran, it would be over 3 or 4 days, and that would be the end of the story. And they would be on the winning team. And they bet on the wrong horse. And they caused massive destruction across the region and across the world because of the energy crisis and the growing energy crisis. And they've created great harm to the Iranian people, which is which other countries would find unforgivable. And this is not the first time they've done it to Iran. As I said earlier, in the 1980s, these 5 countries, they supported Saddam Hussein. They gave him onions, the chemical weapons that the Germans and the Europeans and the West gave him political cover for. These people provided the money. So, what they've done to the Iranian people goes back 47 years. They were afraid of the revolution because the revolution brought hope for the global South in a new way forward instead of the communist bloc and the capitalist bloc. And so they, from the very beginning, began to use racism, sectarianism to marginalize and to surround and weaken the movement. They were despotic regimes. They didn't want revolution in their own countries. And so their interests and the Israeli interests and the Western interests and the Soviet Union interests, all of them overlapped to a large degree. So this is not new what they're doing to Iran. But as we speak, Iran is in communication with all of these countries and is trying to push them in a different direction. But look at Oman, for example. Oman has its own problems. It too has relations and connections with the Israeli regime. Not official relations, but it has connections with the Israeli regime. But Oman did not participate in this war, and they've reaped the benefits. Iran has shown no aggression towards Oman. If these 5 countries had behaved the same, we wouldn't have had a war, and the relationship would have been completely different. But they chose a different path. But it's still not too late. And the Iranians are trying to. We've seen Qatari delegations come to Iran, the Emiratis send people to Iran, and Iran has been negotiating with all 5 countries. But at the end of the day, if the United States assaults Iran and strikes Iran's critical infrastructure, none of them can pretend that they were not involved. They will be guilty. And it is for them to protect their own assets. And the only way to do that is not to be a part of the aggression.